So, Julie, I know lots of people play, I'm going to call the first three levels of Numero. So they'll do the sort of matching stuff with maybe the addition. They'll link in the wildcards for subtraction, and then they'll move up to the multiplication and division wildcards, and even then in a bit of an order. But now, if you really want to go a bit further, can you tell us what else you can do with Numero? Bearing in mind you've got all the cards already, so you might as well.
Absolutely. Well, the next level, so we've moved on, we've got subtraction, multiplication and division in their packs, and then the next natural movement is onto our fractions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fractions, I also suggest they use the fractions with a numerator of 1 first. Getting them very comfortable. If a child can do divide 2, they can actually do a half, because they're really just dividing by the denominator.
Yeah, so I see.
And it's creating that understanding of fractions.
So you've got the unit fractions, yeah,
Yep.
the numerator's 1, yeah.
So they would start by that. As long as the numerator is 1, then really they are the equivalent, mathematically, of doing a division card.
Yes.
So it introduces them in a fairly non-threatening manner to playing with fractions, because a lot of people get scared of fractions.
Yeah, I noticed another thing here. You actually not only just have the fraction, you have the percentage and the decimal there. Why is that?
Well, the main reason for that is if we make them understand that it is the same value. So if I do a tenth of something, I could also say I'm doing 10% of something. Now, what I do find with a lot of schools, if they're working on percentage in their class that week and they play Numero, they might say, you know what, guys, we want you to talk in percentage this week. So when they use those cards, they're going to refer to it as a percentage or decimals, depending on what they're working on in the class. Honestly, the kids usually will prefer to use it in the fraction form because it's just a little bit cleaner and easier for them once they're used to them. But I do encourage, if that's what you're working on in your class, use that terminology and get the kids to use percentage or decimal.
Okay, so I remember actually having this conversation with your dad, and we talked about having beyond 100% or beyond the fraction. So he's got 1.5 and 2.
We do.
Yeah.
So we move from the numerator of 1 to fractions that have a different numerator, okay, and then progressively on to what we call the mixed numerals. And it's good for the kids because they understand that, hey, if I'm doing 1.5, I'm using one whole lot of something and half of that again, and then I have to do both those calculations and join them together. So it is a next stage.
So from your experience, Julie, like the people like maybe higher level primary school, lower secondary, or where do they start sort of playing?
Okay, as a general rule of thumb, if you like, I'd be saying by year 4, I'd be wanting to get the fractions with a numerator of 1 in there.
Okay, yep.
Okay, now I'm not saying it's necessarily where it comes in the curriculum, but from their playing abilities, once they can use division, they can use these.
Yes, because of the link to division.
And I often find kids that aren't ready for it, perhaps in their normal maths, will come to me and say, hey, Mrs. Richards, I want to use one of those. How can I use it? And I'll find them wanting to use it in Numero before they've even done it in their curriculum in class, which to me just makes it easier for them when they get to that point. So, yes, so I'd say about year 4. But in saying that, we do encourage use of all fractions before year 6, absolutely. They should be playing with all the fractions, perhaps not the mixed numerals if they're not ready for it, but definitely all the other fractions before the end of year 6.
Okay.
And then we say secondary, we start bringing in these.
Okay, so I see you've got a couple more levels there. So,
absolutely.
So if you want to, you could even take it further.
Perfectly. So we move on from level 4.
Wow.
And here's our next challenge. And these I do suggest generally don't come into year 7.
Yeah.
Okay. But I believe they're actually in the maths curriculum at year 6.
Yeah.
So they can be talked about and brought in at year 6.
Certainly squaring is, yeah.
Yes. So, but this then will bring in your final total of your 89 cards that are in the pack that you originally start with. These are the last of the wild cards you add in.
Okay.
And allows them to do that.
Now, I notice you've also got an option to do some scoring. That adds more to the game, obviously.
Scoring is something, I use it particularly when you have those students that really need something above and beyond. They're those exceptional kids that need something different to keep them stimulated. Or, in fact, if you have a child that simply needs to work alone.
Okay.
Sometimes they can do the scoring level as well. There's other things that I can bring in for that later. But the scoring level is something, to be honest, I don't use it a lot in primary school. I tend to use it more in secondary school. And also tends to be used more for parents and teachers playing at home. It's very much a home-based thing.
Fair enough. Good idea.
Because of time constraints.
All right. Well, thanks, Julie, for giving us those levels there. And I can see how you add in more cards.
Yep.
And it really breathes more life back into the game. So thanks for those tips.
You're welcome.